Picture this. It's the year 1150, somewhere in the rolling hills of what we now call Germany. The morning mist clings to a small village where most people will never travel more than 20 miles from where they were born, where the height of technology is a water wheel grinding grain, and where the fastest way to send a message is to put a man on a horse and hope he doesn't get murdered by bandits along the way. Now imagine, in this world of mud and superstition, a child is born who thinks differently. Not just a little differently, but so radically, so fundamentally at odds with everything around him that he might as well have dropped from another planet. A child whose mind works like a modern innovator, but who must navigate a world where questioning the wrong thing can get you burned at the stake. Tonight, we're diving deep into one of history's most fascinating what-ifs. What if Elon Musk, with all his relentless ambition, his obsession with first principles thinking, and his complete disregard for conventional wisdom, had been born not in 1971 in South Africa, but in 1150 in medieval Europe? This isn't just a thought experiment. It's a journey through one of the most transformative periods in human history, seen through the eyes of someone who might have transformed it even more. We're going to follow this fictional medieval Musk from his birth in a world dominated by feudal lords and Catholic doctrine, through his struggles with the limitations of medieval technology and society, to his potential impact on the course of human civilization. But before we begin, let's set the stage properly. Because understanding what our medieval innovator was up against requires understanding just how different the world of 1150 really was. The Europe of the mid-12th century was a continent in transition. The Dark Ages were lifting, yes, but slowly, like fog burning off in the morning sun. This was the era of the High Middle Ages, a time when Europe was beginning to flex its intellectual and economic muscles after centuries of relative stagnation. The first stirrings of what would become the Renaissance were still 2 centuries away, but the foundations were being laid. Politically, Europe was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, all bound together by the complex web of feudalism. Kings granted land to nobles in exchange for military service. Nobles granted portions of their land to knights and lesser nobles. At the bottom of this pyramid sat the serfs, bound to the land, working fields they would never own for lords they would never meet. The Catholic Church wasn't just a religious institution. It was the single most powerful force in medieval Europe, controlling not just spiritual life, but education, politics, and vast swathes of land. To challenge church doctrine wasn't just heresy, it was treason against the very fabric of society. The church controlled the flow of information, deciding what knowledge was acceptable and what was dangerous. Yet this was also a world on the cusp of extraordinary change. The Crusades, those bloody religious wars that began in 1095, had an unexpected side effect. They brought Europeans into contact with the Islamic world, where scholars in places like Baghdad and Cordoba had preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek and Roman knowledge. Mathematical concepts, medical knowledge, and engineering techniques were beginning to trickle back into Europe through trade routes and returning crusaders. Universities were just beginning to emerge. The University of Bologna had been established in 1088, followed by Paris in the early 1100s. These weren't the sprawling campuses we know today, but small communities of scholars and students, often meeting in rented rooms or church buildings, debating theology, law, and the works of Aristotle. Technology in 1150 was primitive by our standards, but it was advancing. Watermills were becoming more common, grinding grain and powering simple machinery. The heavy plough was revolutionizing agriculture, allowing farmers to work the heavy clay soils of northern Europe more effectively. Windmills would appear within the next few decades. The magnetic compass was beginning to make navigation more reliable. But for all these advances, life for most people remained brutal, short, and constrained. The average person lived in a one-room house with a dirt floor, shared with their animals for warmth. They ate a diet consisting mainly of bread, porridge, and whatever vegetables they could grow. Meat was a luxury reserved for special occasions. Disease was rampant, medicine was primitive, and clean water was often hard to come by. Into this world, let's imagine, was born our protagonist. Let's call him Elred, a name that would have been common in 1150. Elred of Thuringia, born to a minor landowner in what is now central Germany. Not wealthy enough to be truly noble, but not poor enough to be a serf. His father owns a few fields, employs several peasants, and owes military service to a local count who owes allegiance to a duke who theoretically serves the Holy Roman Emperor. From his earliest years, Elred is different. While other children play with sticks and stones, he's fascinated by how things work. He takes apart the family's oil lamps to understand how the flame burns. He studies the water wheel at the local mill, sketching its mechanism in the dirt with a stick. He asks questions that make the local priest uncomfortable. Why do some stones sink while others float? Why does iron rust but gold doesn't? Why do birds fly but people can't? His parents, devout Christians like everyone around them, are worried. These aren't the kinds of questions a good Christian child should be asking. The priest tells them their son has too much curiosity for his own good. Curiosity, after all, was what got Adam and Eve expelled from Eden. But Elred can't help himself. His mind works differently, constantly seeking to understand the underlying principles behind everything he observes. By age 10, Elred has exhausted the knowledge of everyone in his village. He's learned to read and write from the local priest, which already puts him ahead of 90% of the population. But reading opens up new worlds of questions. The few books available in the village are mostly religious texts, but even these contain references to natural phenomena that fascinate him. Why did God make water freeze? How do the stars move across the sky? What lies beyond the horizon? His father, recognizing that his son's mind needs more stimulation than village life can provide, makes a decision that will change everything. He decides to send Elred to the monastery at Fulda, one of the great centers of learning in the German lands. It's a costly decision, requiring not just the monastery fee, but also the loss of a potential heir to work the family lands. But something tells him his strange, questioning son is destined for more than farming. The monastery at Fulda in 1160 is like stepping into another world. Founded in 744, it houses one of the largest libraries in Northern Europe, with several hundred manuscripts covering theology, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The monks here aren't just copying texts, they're studying them, debating them, and occasionally adding to them. For 10-year-old Elred, it's paradise. For the first time in his life, he's surrounded by people who value knowledge and learning. The monastery follows the rule of Saint Benedict, which emphasizes not just prayer and manual labor, but also study. Idleness is the enemy of the soul, Benedict had written, and the monks of Fulda take this seriously. Elred throws himself into his studies with an intensity that amazes even the scholarly monks. He masters Latin within months, racing through texts that would challenge older students. But it's not just memorization that sets him apart. He approaches every subject with what we might recognize as first principles thinking, breaking down complex ideas into their fundamental components and building them back up from scratch. When studying Aristotle's physics, he doesn't just accept the philosopher's conclusions, he tests them. He drops objects of different weights from the monastery tower, timing their falls with an improvised water clock. To his amazement, they hit the ground at nearly the same time, contradicting Aristotle's claim that heavier objects fall faster. The monks are disturbed by his experiments. Aristotle was considered nearly as authoritative as scripture. To question him was to question the very foundations of knowledge, but Elred can't help questioning. When he studies the monastery's mechanical clock, one of the first in Germany, he doesn't just marvel at its precision. He takes detailed notes on its mechanism, sketching improvements that could make it more accurate. When he observes the monastery's mill, he envisions ways to harness water power for purposes beyond grinding grain. What if that same force could power looms for weaving? Or bellows for metalworking? Or pumps for draining mines? His questions extend beyond the purely mechanical. The monastery's library contains works on economics and trade, and Elred devours them with the same intensity he brings to natural philosophy. He studies the growing network of trade routes connecting Europe to Asia, the rise of merchant guilds, and the increasing use of money rather than barter in commercial transactions. What he sees excites him. Commerce is creating wealth in ways that the traditional feudal system never could. Cities are growing as centers of trade and manufacturing. New technologies are emerging to meet the demands of this expanding economy. But to Elred's systematic mind, it's all happening too slowly, too haphazardly. There has to be a better way to organize these forces, to accelerate the pace of innovation and economic growth. By age 15, Elred has absorbed everything the monastery can teach him. He's read every book in the library, some multiple times. He's engaged in theological debates with monks twice his age, and usually won. He's conducted experiments that challenge accepted wisdom and proposed innovations that make the monastery's operations more efficient. But he's also become a source of concern. His constant questioning has attracted the attention of church authorities beyond the monastery. Reports have reached the local bishop about a young monk who challenges Aristotle, proposes mechanical innovations that border on the magical, and asks uncomfortable questions about church doctrine. In an age where conformity is not just expected, but enforced, Elred's intellectual independence is beginning to look dangerous. The abbot of Fulda, a wise man who has watched Elred's development with fascination and growing worry, calls him aside for a conversation that will determine his future. They meet in the monastery's garden on a crisp autumn evening in 1165. The 15-year-old Elred, tall for his age, his eyes bright with the intensity that has marked him since childhood. "You have a remarkable mind, my son," the abbot begins carefully. But remarkable minds can be dangerous things in our world. The church values learning, yes, but it also values orthodoxy. There are those who believe your questions go too far, that your experiments border on the forbidden arts. Elred listens respectfully, but the abbot can see the fire still burning in his eyes. This is not a young man who will be content to copy manuscripts and recite prayers for the rest of his life. This is someone who needs to build, to create, to transform the world around him. "I believe," the abbot continues, "that God has given you gifts that are meant to be used beyond these walls. The world is changing, and perhaps it needs minds like yours to guide that change. But you must be careful. The line between innovation and heresy is thinner than you might think." He pauses, studying the young face before him. "I'm going to arrange for you to leave the monastery, not in disgrace, but as our representative to the wider world. There are opportunities in the growing cities, among the merchant guilds and craftsmen who are beginning to transform Europe. Your knowledge and your mind could serve God better there than here. It's a momentous decision, one that will set our medieval innovator on a path that could reshape history." As we'll see, the transition from the scholarly world of the monastery to the rough and tumble world of medieval commerce will test every aspect of Elred's character and abilities. The world he's about to enter is one of extraordinary opportunity and equally extraordinary danger. The medieval economy is booming, driven by expanding trade routes, new agricultural techniques, and the first stirrings of what we might recognize as capitalism. Cities like Venice, Genoa, and the growing towns of the Hanseatic League are becoming centers of wealth and innovation that rival anything seen since the fall of Rome. But it's also a world where success depends not just on intelligence and innovation, but on navigating complex social hierarchies, religious constraints, and political realities. A world where the wrong word or the wrong invention could lead to accusations of heresy or sorcery. A world where even the most brilliant mind must work within systems that have evolved over centuries to resist change. As Aelred prepares to leave the only intellectual home he's ever known, he carries with him not just the knowledge he's gained, but a vision of what the world could become. He sees a future where human ingenuity is unleashed on an unprecedented scale, where technology serves not just the wealthy and powerful, but improves the lives of ordinary people, where the barriers between nations and classes are broken down by the free flow of ideas and commerce. It's a vision that will drive him for the rest of his life, through triumphs and setbacks, through periods of acclaim and persecution, a vision that will lead him to attempt innovations that won't be seen in our actual timeline for centuries. And perhaps, just perhaps, a vision that could have changed the course of human history itself. But that transformation won't come easily. The young man who rides away from Fulda Monastery in the spring of 1166, his few possessions packed in saddlebags, his head full of dreams and schemes, is about to discover just how resistant the medieval world can be to revolutionary change. His first destination is Cologne, one of the largest and most prosperous cities in the German lands, where he hopes to find opportunities to put his ideas into practice. What he'll find there will test everything he believes about human nature, about the power of innovation to overcome entrenched interests, and about his own ability to survive and thrive in a world that has little patience for visionaries who want to turn everything upside down. The road to Cologne stretches before Aelred like a ribbon of possibility and peril. As his horse picks its way along the rutted path, he passes a world in motion that would have been unimaginable just a century earlier. Merchants with pack trains loaded with goods from distant lands, pilgrims heading to shrines across Europe, students travelling between the growing universities, and craftsmen seeking work in the expanding cities. This is the medieval economy in full swing, and to Aelred's systematic mind, it's both fascinating and frustrating. He sees inefficiencies everywhere. Merchants travelling the same routes repeatedly without coordination, wasting time and resources. Goods being transported in wagons that break down constantly because no one has standardized the wheel sizes or axle designs. Information moving at the speed of a walking horse, creating delays that cost fortunes in spoiled goods and missed opportunities. But he also sees potential. The very fact that this commerce exists at all proves that Europe is ready for innovation on a scale that would have been impossible during the chaos of the early Middle Ages. The question is whether the existing power structures will allow that innovation to flourish, or whether they'll crush it to protect their own interests. Cologne, when it finally appears on the horizon after 3 days of hard riding, takes Aelred's breath away. With nearly 40,000 inhabitants, it's one of the largest cities north of the Alps, a sprawling maze of timber and stone buildings clustered around the massive cathedral that dominates the skyline. The city walls enclose a world of contradictions, where magnificent merchant houses stand next to hovels that wouldn't be fit for animals, where the latest luxury goods from Constantinople are sold in markets that reek of human waste and rotting food. The noise hits him first. After the ordered quiet of the monastery, the cacophony of urban life is overwhelming. Hammers ringing on anvils, merchants hawking their wares in a dozen different languages, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestones, the lowing of cattle being driven to market. This is what progress sounds like in the 12th century, and it's both exhilarating and terrifying. Aelred finds lodging at an inn near the river, a cramped establishment that caters to merchants and students. The innkeeper, a shrewd woman named Gertrude, who clearly runs the business while her husband drinks away the profits, sizes him up immediately. She's seen enough young men arrive in Cologne with nothing but ambition and a few coins, and most of them end up begging in the streets or joining the ranks of cutthroats who prey on travellers. But there's something different about this one. The way he observes everything with those intense eyes, asking questions about the inn's operations that no guest has ever asked before. How much firewood do they burn in a day? Where does their water come from? How do they dispose of waste? Most people accept these things as they are, but this young man seems to be calculating, measuring, looking for improvements. Within a week, Aelred has transformed the inn's efficiency. He's redesigned the hearth to burn wood more completely, reducing smoke and increasing heat output. He's created a system for collecting and filtering rainwater that provides cleaner drinking water than the river. He's even improved the design of the privy, making it less offensive and more sanitary. Gertrude is impressed, but she's also worried. In a world where change is viewed with suspicion, someone who improves things too quickly can attract the wrong kind of attention. The guild system that dominates medieval urban life exists partly to maintain quality and standards, but also to prevent outsiders from disrupting established ways of doing business. The Carpenters' Guild, for instance, doesn't appreciate Aelred's suggestions for more efficient joint designs. The Blacksmiths' Guild is suspicious of his ideas for improving furnace temperature. And the merchant guilds that control most of Cologne's commerce are downright hostile to his proposals for standardizing weights, measures, and transportation methods. But Aelred persists, driven by a vision that extends far beyond the narrow concerns of medieval craftsmen. He spends his days walking through the city's workshops and markets, observing, learning, and asking questions that make people uncomfortable. He studies the great crane that lifts stones for the cathedral construction, envisioning ways to make it more powerful and precise. He examines the mills along the river, calculating how their output could be increased and their power applied to new purposes. His breakthrough comes, unexpectedly, through a problem that's plaguing the entire city. Cologne's prosperity depends on river trade, but the Rhine's water levels fluctuate dramatically with the seasons. In dry summers, larger ships can't reach the city's docks. In spring floods, the docks themselves are often underwater. The merchants have learned to live with these limitations, adjusting their schedules and inventory accordingly. But Aelred sees a solution that no one else has considered. What if they could control the water level artificially? Not through magic or divine intervention, but through engineering. He studied the Roman aqueducts that still function in parts of Europe, and he understands the principles of hydraulic engineering better than most people of his time. His proposal is audacious. Build a series of locks and dams upstream from the city, creating a system that can regulate water flow throughout the year. It would require massive construction projects, coordinated planning across multiple territories, and investment on a scale that medieval Europe has rarely seen. But the benefits would be enormous. Reliable navigation, flood control, and the potential to harness water power for industrial purposes on an unprecedented scale. The reaction is mixed. Some merchants see the potential for increased profits and are willing to listen. Others dismiss the idea as impossible. The fantasy of a young man who doesn't understand how the world really works. The church authorities are concerned about the theological implications of attempting to control God's creation. And the various nobles who control the territories along the Rhine are suspicious of any project that might shift the balance of power in the region. But Aelred has learned something important from his time in Cologne. In the medieval world, as in any world, innovation requires more than just good ideas. It requires allies, resources, and the ability to navigate complex political and social networks. He needs to find people who share his vision and have the power to make it reality. His first ally comes from an unexpected source. Brother Marcus, a Benedictine monk from a monastery upstream from Cologne, arrives in the city on monastery business and hears about Aelred's water management proposal. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Marcus has studied mathematics and engineering in addition to theology. He recognizes the brilliance of Aelred's plan, and more importantly, he sees its potential benefits for his own monastery's operations. The monastery of St. Pantaleon controls significant territory along the Rhine and operates several mills that could benefit enormously from regulated water flow. More intriguingly, Brother Marcus has connections throughout the Benedictine network, including monasteries with resources and influence that could support large-scale construction projects. Together, they begin to develop a more sophisticated version of Elred's original plan. Instead of trying to revolutionize the entire Rhine system at once, they'll start with a demonstration project on a smaller river that flows into the Rhine near the monastery. If they can prove the concept works on a manageable scale, they can gradually expand the system. The technical challenges are immense. Medieval construction techniques are adequate for building castles and cathedrals, but engineering projects that must withstand the force of flowing water require different skills and materials. Elred throws himself into the problem with characteristic intensity, studying every available text on hydraulics and mechanics, experimenting with different construction materials, and developing new techniques for measuring and controlling water flow. His approach combines the theoretical knowledge he gained at the monastery with practical insights drawn from observing medieval craftsmen at work. He designs locks that use counterweights and gear systems to reduce the human effort required to operate them. He develops new methods for waterproofing construction joints using materials available in the 12th century. Most importantly, he creates detailed plans and specifications that can be followed by workers who may not understand the underlying engineering principles. The construction project begins in the spring of 1168, funded by a consortium of monasteries, merchant guilds, and minor nobles who have been convinced of its potential. It's a modest beginning compared to Aelred's ultimate vision, but it represents something revolutionary in medieval Europe, a systematic, planned approach to technological innovation. The work proceeds slowly, hampered by the same challenges that face all medieval construction projects. Workers must be recruited and trained. Materials must be transported over poor roads. Weather delays construction for months at a time. Political disputes between different stakeholders threaten to shut down the project entirely, but Aelred has learned to work within these constraints rather than fighting against them. He establishes workshops near the construction site where workers can be trained in the specialized techniques required for hydraulic engineering. He develops supply chains that ensure materials arrive when needed. Most importantly, he creates a management structure that keeps the various stakeholders informed and engaged. The breakthrough comes in the autumn of 1169, when the first lock becomes operational. Watching a fully loaded river barge rise smoothly from one water level to another, controlled by machinery operated by just 2 workers, the assembled observers finally understand what Aelred has been trying to achieve. This isn't just an improvement to existing technology, it's a fundamental transformation in humanity's ability to control and direct natural forces. News of the successful demonstration spreads rapidly through medieval Europe's network of merchants, monks, and nobles. Delegations arrive from as far away as Venice and Paris to examine the new technology. Some come as potential customers, interested in applying similar systems to their own territories. Others come as competitors, hoping to steal the techniques and apply them elsewhere, but Aelred is already thinking beyond this single project. The success of the lock system has proven something important about medieval society. It's more ready for technological innovation than most people realize. The key is presenting that innovation in ways that work with existing power structures rather than threatening them. His next project is even more ambitious. Instead of focusing solely on water management, he wants to create an integrated system that combines transportation, manufacturing, and communication. He envisions a network of improved waterways connecting the major cities of Northern Europe with standardized locks, docks, and cargo handling systems. Along these waterways, he wants to establish manufacturing centers that use water power not just for grinding grain, but for textile production, metalworking, and other industries that are just beginning to emerge in medieval Europe. The communication aspect of his plan is perhaps the most revolutionary. He proposes a system of signal towers and messenger stations that could transmit information across hundreds of miles in a matter of hours, rather than days or weeks. Using a combination of smoke signals, mirror flashes, and trained messengers on horseback, the system could provide merchants, nobles, and church authorities with information that would give them enormous advantages in trade, warfare, and diplomacy. The scope of this vision attracts attention from the highest levels of medieval society. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, engaged in a complex struggle with the Pope and various Italian city-states, sees the potential military and economic advantages of improved transportation and communication systems. Several of the most powerful merchant families in Northern Europe recognize that whoever controls these systems will dominate medieval commerce. But the very ambition of Aelred's plan also creates powerful enemies. Existing transportation guilds see their monopolies threatened. Local nobles worry about losing control over trade routes that pass through their territories. Church authorities are concerned about the theological implications of technologies that seem to challenge divine providence. The opposition crystallizes around a figure who will become Aelred's greatest adversary, Archbishop Conrad of Cologne, a brilliant and ruthless man who has built his power by maintaining careful balance between the various factions in medieval politics. Conrad recognizes that Aelred's innovations could upset that balance in unpredictable ways, potentially undermining the Church's authority and the social order that supports it. Their first direct confrontation comes during a public debate held in Cologne's cathedral in the winter of 1170. The ostensible topic is whether Aelred's engineering projects are consistent with Christian doctrine, but the real issue is whether medieval society will embrace or resist technological change on an unprecedented scale. Conrad is a formidable opponent, trained in theology and law, experienced in public speaking, and backed by centuries of church doctrine. He argues that Aelred's innovations represent dangerous pride, an attempt to improve upon God's creation that inevitably leads to corruption and sin. He cites biblical passages about the Tower of Babel and classical texts about the dangers of human ambition. But Aelred has spent years preparing for exactly this kind of challenge. He counters with his own theological arguments, citing passages that celebrate human creativity and stewardship of creation. He points to the practical benefits of his innovations: reduced suffering from floods and droughts, improved living conditions for ordinary people, and increased prosperity that allows for greater charitable giving and support for the Church. More importantly, he demonstrates his innovations rather than just describing them. He's brought working models of his lock systems, gear mechanisms, and communication devices. When the theoretical arguments grow complex and abstract, he can point to physical objects that clearly work and clearly provide benefits. The debate continues for 3 days, drawing crowds that fill the cathedral and spill out into the surrounding streets. By the end, neither side has achieved a decisive victory, but something important has changed. The possibility of large-scale technological innovation is now part of public discourse in a way it never has been before. The immediate result is a flood of interest from across Europe. Letters arrive from scholars, merchants, nobles, and even other church authorities, some offering support and others demanding more information. Several major construction projects are proposed based on Aelred's designs. New workshops are established to train workers in the techniques he's developed, but the long-term consequences are even more significant. For the first time in centuries, medieval Europe is actively debating the role of technology in society. Questions that won't be seriously considered in our timeline until the Renaissance are being raised in the 12th century. Should human beings attempt to control natural forces? Can technological innovation be consistent with Christian values? What are the social and economic implications of rapid technological change? These debates are taking place against a backdrop of broader changes that are transforming medieval Europe. The Crusades have exposed Europeans to new ideas and technologies from the Islamic world. Trade with Asia is bringing not just luxury goods, but also knowledge of advanced manufacturing techniques and scientific concepts. The growth of cities is creating new social classes and new forms of economic organization that don't fit neatly into the traditional feudal hierarchy. Elred's innovations are accelerating these changes rather than causing them, but the acceleration is dramatic enough to create both opportunities and dangers. Cities that adopt his transportation and manufacturing systems grow rapidly in wealth and population. Regions that resist change find themselves increasingly isolated and economically disadvantaged. The political implications are equally profound. Traditional power structures based on land ownership and military service are being challenged by new forms of wealth based on commerce and manufacturing. The Church's intellectual monopoly is being questioned by lay people who have access to practical knowledge that clearly works. Even the concept of social mobility is being redefined as skilled engineers, and innovative merchants achieve status and influence that would have been impossible under the traditional system. By 1175, 5 years after the Great Debate in Cologne Cathedral, Elred has become one of the most famous and controversial figures in Europe. His supporters hail him as a visionary who is ushering in a new age of prosperity and progress. His critics denounce him as a dangerous radical who is undermining the foundations of Christian civilization. The truth, as usual, is more complex. Elred's innovations are indeed transforming medieval society, but not always in the ways he intended or expected. Some of his projects have succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, creating wealth and improving living conditions on a scale that amazes even him. Others have failed catastrophically, wasting enormous resources and sometimes causing the very problems they were supposed to solve. Most significantly, he's learning that technological innovation alone isn't enough to create lasting change. Social, economic, and political systems have their own momentum and resistance to change. Even the most brilliant engineering solutions can be undermined by human greed, prejudice, and short-sightedness. This realization leads to a fundamental shift in Elred's approach. Instead of focusing primarily on technical problems, he begins to study the human systems that determine whether innovations will be adopted or rejected. He develops what we might recognize as early theories of technology adoption, economic development, and social change. His insights prove remarkably prescient. He recognizes that successful innovation requires not just technical excellence, but also careful attention to existing power structures, economic incentives, and cultural values. He learns to present his ideas in ways that appeal to different audiences, emphasizing military advantages when talking to nobles, economic benefits when addressing merchants, and theological compatibility when dealing with church authorities. This more sophisticated approach leads to his most successful project yet, the establishment of what he calls innovation centers in several major European cities. These are essentially medieval research and development institutes, combining workshops for practical experimentation with libraries for theoretical study and schools for training skilled workers. The centers are funded by consortiums of merchants, nobles, and church institutions, each with different motivations, but all recognizing the potential benefits. They operate under charters that guarantee intellectual freedom within carefully defined limits, allowing for experimentation and innovation while avoiding direct challenges to religious or political authority. The first center, established in Cologne in 1176, becomes a model for similar institutions across Europe. Within its walls, craftsmen work alongside scholars to develop new technologies and improve existing ones. Students come from across the continent to learn advanced techniques in metallurgy, mechanics, hydraulics, and other fields that are just beginning to emerge as distinct disciplines. The impact is immediate and dramatic. New inventions and improvements emerge from the centers at a pace that astounds contemporary observers. More importantly, the centers begin to train a new class of skilled professionals who can apply systematic approaches to technical problems. These individuals carry their knowledge and methods to new locations, creating a network of innovation that spreads across medieval Europe. But success brings new challenges. As Aelred's influence grows, so does the opposition to his work. Traditional craft guilds feel threatened by the new production methods emerging from the innovation centres. Conservative church authorities worry that the centres are fostering dangerous ideas about the relationship between human knowledge and divine truth. Political leaders fear that technological change is undermining their ability to control their subjects. The crisis comes in 1178, when a coalition of guild leaders, church conservatives, and threatened nobles attempts to shut down the innovation centres by force. They claim that the centres are promoting heretical ideas and dangerous technologies that threaten the stability of Christian society. Armed groups attack several centres, destroying equipment and scattering the scholars and craftsmen who work there. Aelred's response reveals how much he's learned about medieval politics and power. Instead of fighting back directly, he appeals to the very authorities who might be expected to support his opponents. He demonstrates to Emperor Frederick Barbarossa how the innovations emerging from the centres could give the Holy Roman Empire decisive advantages in its ongoing conflicts with other powers. He shows church leaders how improved technologies could help spread Christianity more effectively and support the church's charitable missions. Most cleverly, he frames the attack on the innovation centres as an attack on property rights and legal contracts. The centres operate under official charters, and their destruction represents a violation of the legal frameworks that protect all forms of investment and enterprise. This argument appeals to the growing merchant class, which recognises that their own prosperity depends on stable legal systems that protect innovative enterprises. The strategy works. The emperor issues a decree protecting the innovation centres and their personnel. Several bishops publicly condemn the attacks as violations of Christian principles of learning and charity. Most importantly, merchant guilds in several cities offer to fund and protect new centres in exchange for access to the technologies they develop. By 1180, the crisis has passed, but it has taught Aelred important lessons about the nature of resistance to change. Opposition to innovation isn't just based on ignorance or superstition. It often represents rational responses by people whose interests are threatened by new technologies and social arrangements. Understanding and addressing these concerns is as important as solving technical problems. This insight leads to what may be Aelred's most important contribution to medieval society: the development of systematic approaches to managing technological and social change. He creates methods for assessing the likely impacts of new technologies on different groups within society. He develops strategies for introducing innovations in ways that minimize disruption while maximizing benefits. Most importantly, he establishes principles for ensuring that the benefits of technological progress are shared broadly rather than concentrated among a small elite. These principles are revolutionary in the context of medieval society, where technological knowledge has traditionally been closely guarded by craft guilds and other exclusive groups. Aelred proposes instead that innovations should be shared freely, with inventors and developers receiving rewards through temporary monopolies rather than permanent secrets. This approach accelerates the pace of innovation while ensuring that improvements eventually benefit everyone. The implementation of these principles transforms the nature of technological development in medieval Europe. Instead of isolated craftsmen working in secret, innovation becomes a collaborative process involving multiple centres, disciplines, and social groups. The result is an acceleration in the pace of change that begins to approach what we might recognise as an early industrial revolution. By 1185, 15 years after the Great Debate in Cologne Cathedral, Aelred's vision is becoming reality in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. Major rivers across northern Europe are being transformed by integrated systems of locks, dams, and improved harbours. Manufacturing centers using water-powered machinery are producing goods at scales and qualities that amaze contemporary observers. Communication networks are transmitting information across vast distances with unprecedented speed and reliability. But perhaps most importantly, a new attitude toward innovation and change is taking root in medieval society. Instead of viewing technological development with suspicion and fear, increasing numbers of people are beginning to see it as a natural and desirable part of human progress. This shift in perspective may be Elred's greatest achievement, creating the intellectual and cultural foundations for changes that will reshape European civilization. The young man who left Fulda Monastery nearly 20 years earlier with nothing but ideas and ambition has become one of the most influential figures of his age. But his greatest challenges still lie ahead, as the success of his innovations begins to attract attention from beyond Europe's borders and sets in motion changes that will test everything he believes about human nature and the possibilities for progress. The success of Elred's innovation centers attracts attention from far beyond the borders of the Holy Roman Empire. By 1185, merchants carrying goods produced by his water-powered workshops are appearing in markets from London to Constantinople. The quality and consistency of these products, along with their competitive prices, are disrupting established trade patterns that have existed for centuries. In Venice, the great maritime republic that has dominated Mediterranean commerce since the Crusades began, the merchant princes are taking notice. Venetian traders returning from Northern Europe bring disturbing reports of manufacturing capabilities that threaten Venice's carefully constructed economic advantages. For generations, Venice has prospered by controlling the flow of luxury goods between Europe and Asia, taking substantial profits from their role as middlemen. But if Northern European cities can produce high-quality goods at competitive prices, that entire system could collapse. The Venetian response is swift and characteristically pragmatic. Instead of trying to suppress Elred's innovations, they decide to acquire them. A delegation of Venice's most influential merchants and scholars travels north in the spring of 1186, carrying with them an offer that would make most men wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. The meeting takes place in Cologne's Guildhall, a magnificent stone building that reflects the city's growing prosperity. The Venetian delegation is led by Marco Dandolo, nephew of the Doge and one of Venice's shrewdest commercial minds. He studied Elred's innovations carefully and understands their implications better than most of his contemporaries. "Your reputation precedes you, Master Elred," Dandolo begins, speaking in the cultured Latin that serves as the international language of medieval commerce. "Venice has built its prosperity on recognizing opportunity before others see it. We believe your innovations represent the greatest commercial opportunity of our age." The offer is breathtaking in its scope. Venice proposes to fund the establishment of innovation centers throughout its territory and trading networks, providing Elred with resources on a scale that dwarfs anything available in Northern Europe. In exchange, Venice would receive exclusive access to his technologies for their maritime empire, gaining decisive advantages over their commercial rivals. But there's more. Venice offers something that no Northern European power can match: access to the knowledge and technologies of the Islamic world and Asia. Through their extensive trading networks, the Venetians have acquired books, instruments, and techniques that are unknown in Christian Europe. They offer to share this knowledge with Elred, combining his systematic approach to innovation with centuries of accumulated wisdom from the most advanced civilizations on Earth. The offer tempts Elred enormously. Venice's resources could accelerate his work by decades, allowing him to pursue innovations that would otherwise remain theoretical dreams. The prospect of accessing Islamic mathematics, Chinese engineering, and Indian metallurgy opens possibilities he's barely dared to imagine. But he also recognizes the trap. Venice's offer would make him wealthy and famous, but it would also make him dependent on a single patron with very specific interests. The innovations he develops would serve Venice's commercial empire rather than benefiting humanity more broadly. The principles of open sharing and collaborative development that he's worked so hard to establish would be abandoned in favor of closely guarded trade secrets. After 3 days of negotiations, Aelred makes a counteroffer that reveals how much his thinking has evolved since his early days as a simple inventor. He proposes to establish innovation centers throughout Venice's territories, but under charters that guarantee the eventual public release of all discoveries. Venice would receive temporary exclusive access to new technologies, giving them commercial advantages for defined periods. But ultimately, all innovations would become available to anyone willing to learn and apply them. More importantly, he proposes to create a network of centers that would span not just Venice's empire, but multiple political and cultural regions. Islamic scholars in Spain and Sicily would work alongside Christian monks and Jewish merchants, sharing knowledge across religious and cultural boundaries that have traditionally prevented such collaboration. The scope of this vision stuns even the worldly Venetians. Aelred is proposing nothing less than the creation of an international system for technological development, transcending the political and religious divisions that have fragmented Europe for centuries. It's a concept so far ahead of its time that it won't be seriously attempted again until the establishment of modern scientific institutions in the 17th and 18th centuries. The negotiations continue for weeks, drawing delegations from across Europe and the Mediterranean. The Holy Roman Emperor sends representatives concerned about maintaining access to innovations that are becoming crucial to military and economic power. The Pope dispatches theologians to ensure that any agreement doesn't compromise Christian doctrine. Islamic rulers in Spain and Sicily send scholars interested in the proposed knowledge-sharing arrangements. The final agreement, signed in Venice in the autumn of 1186, establishes what contemporary chroniclers call the Great Partnership. It creates a network of innovation centers spanning from England to the Eastern Mediterranean, funded by a consortium of Christian and Islamic powers, and governed by principles that guarantee both protection for inventors and eventual public access to their discoveries. The implementation of this agreement transforms medieval intellectual life in ways that would have been unimaginable just a generation earlier. For the first time since the fall of Rome, scholars and craftsmen from different cultures are working together systematically, sharing knowledge and techniques that had been carefully guarded secrets for centuries. The results are immediate and dramatic. Islamic mathematical techniques, including advanced algebra and trigonometry, are combined with European mechanical engineering to create new forms of precision instruments. Chinese knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry is applied to European mining and manufacturing, dramatically improving both quality and efficiency. Indian astronomical observations are combined with European mechanical skills to create clocks and navigational instruments of unprecedented accuracy. But perhaps most importantly, the collaboration creates new methods of systematic investigation and experimentation. Islamic scholars have preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek approaches to natural philosophy, while European craftsmen have developed practical skills in metallurgy, mechanics, and hydraulics. The combination produces what we might recognize as early versions of scientific method, applied to technological development on an unprecedented scale. Aelred finds himself at the center of this intellectual revolution, but also struggling to manage its explosive growth. By 1190, the network includes more than 30 centers employing thousands of scholars, craftsmen, and students. The volume of innovations emerging from these centers is overwhelming existing systems for testing, refining, and implementing new technologies. More challenging still, the rapid pace of change is creating social and economic disruptions that threaten to undermine the very foundations of medieval society. Traditional craft guilds find their methods and products obsolete almost overnight. Agricultural systems that have remained unchanged for centuries are being revolutionized by new tools and techniques. Even fundamental concepts like time and distance are being redefined by improved clocks and transportation systems. The most dramatic example comes in 1191, when one of Aelred's centers develops what they call a fire engine, essentially a primitive steam engine used to pump water from mines. The device can drain flooded mines faster and more efficiently than teams of men with buckets, but it also threatens to put hundreds of miners out of work. When the first fire engine is installed at a silver mine in the German lands, the displaced workers riot, destroying the machine and attacking the engineers who built it. The incident forces Elred to confront a problem he hadn't fully anticipated: the social consequences of rapid technological change. His innovations are indeed improving human life and creating new forms of wealth, but they're also disrupting established social relationships and economic systems that millions of people depend on for their survival. The solution he develops reveals the sophisticated understanding of social systems that he's acquired through decades of navigating medieval politics. Instead of simply imposing new technologies on unwilling populations, he begins to develop systematic approaches to managing technological transitions. New innovations are introduced gradually, with training programs for displaced workers and compensation systems for those whose livelihoods are threatened. More importantly, he begins to involve local communities in the innovation process itself. Instead of developing technologies in isolation and then trying to implement them, his centers begin working directly with the people who will use them, incorporating their knowledge and addressing their concerns from the beginning. This participatory approach proves remarkably effective. When mining communities help design new extraction techniques, they're more likely to accept and improve upon them. When farmers are involved in developing new agricultural tools, they can provide insights that laboratory experiments would never reveal. When merchants participate in designing new transportation systems, they ensure that the systems actually meet commercial needs. The success of this approach attracts attention from the highest levels of medieval society. In 1193, Pope Celestine III issues a papal bull officially endorsing Aelred's innovation network, declaring that the systematic study of God's creation is not only permissible, but a religious duty. The document, known as Scientia et Fides, knowledge and faith, provides theological justification for experimental investigation and technological development that wouldn't be seen again until the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. The papal endorsement removes the last major obstacle to widespread technological innovation in Christian Europe. Monasteries begin establishing their own experimental workshops. Universities add practical engineering to their curricula alongside theology and law. Even parish priests begin encouraging their congregations to adopt new agricultural techniques and mechanical devices. The pace of change accelerates dramatically. By 1195, water-powered machinery is transforming textile production across Europe. New metallurgical techniques are producing steel of unprecedented quality and consistency. Improved navigation instruments are making sea travel safer and more reliable. Most remarkably, a primitive printing system using movable wooden blocks is beginning to reproduce manuscripts faster and more accurately than traditional copying methods. But it's the cumulative effect of these innovations that proves most transformative. Medieval Europe is experiencing something that won't be seen again until the Industrial Revolution of the 18th century. A systematic transformation of the material conditions of human life. People are living longer, eating better, and enjoying access to goods and services that would have been unimaginable to their grandparents. The social implications are equally profound. The traditional feudal hierarchy, based on land ownership and military service, is being challenged by new forms of wealth based on manufacturing, trade, and technological innovation. Skilled craftsmen and successful merchants are achieving social status that rivals that of minor nobles. Even peasants are gaining new opportunities, as improved agricultural techniques reduce the labor required for food production, freeing people to pursue other occupations. These changes create both opportunities and tensions. Progressive nobles who embrace new technologies find their territories growing in wealth and population. conservative lords who resist change find themselves increasingly isolated and economically disadvantaged. The result is a gradual but fundamental shift in the balance of power within medieval society. The transformation is perhaps most visible in the cities, which are growing at unprecedented rates as people migrate from rural areas to take advantage of new economic opportunities. Cologne, which had 40,000 inhabitants when Aelred first arrived, has grown to nearly 70,000 by 1195. Similar growth is occurring throughout the innovation network, creating urban centres that rival anything seen since the height of the Roman Empire. But urban growth brings new challenges. Medieval cities weren't designed to handle such large populations, and the infrastructure is struggling to keep pace. Water supplies become contaminated, waste disposal systems are overwhelmed, and housing shortages force people into overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. Aelred responds to these challenges with characteristic systematic thinking. He begins developing what we might recognize as early urban planning, designing integrated systems for water supply, waste management, and transportation that can support much larger populations. His innovations in this area include covered sewers, public fountains supplied by pressurized water systems, and standardized building codes that ensure adequate light and ventilation. More ambitiously, he begins planning entirely new cities designed from the ground up to incorporate the latest innovations in urban infrastructure. These planned communities, established in territories controlled by progressive nobles, become showcases for the possibilities of systematic technological development applied to human settlement. The first of these experimental cities, established in 1196 in the Rhine Valley, becomes a model for urban development that won't be seen again until the planned industrial cities of the 19th century. The city is laid out on a grid pattern with wide streets designed to accommodate wheeled traffic. Water is supplied by an aqueduct system that brings clean mountain water directly to public fountains throughout the city. Waste is removed by a comprehensive sewer system that carries it downstream from residential areas. Most innovatively, the city includes specialized districts for different types of manufacturing, with workshops located to minimize conflicts between incompatible activities. Metalworking shops, which require high temperatures and produce noise and smoke, are separated from textile workshops that need clean air and consistent temperatures. Residential areas are positioned to take advantage of prevailing winds while remaining convenient to workplaces. The planned city attracts residents from across Europe, drawn by the promise of employment in advanced industries and living conditions superior to anything available in traditional medieval settlements. Within 5 years, it has grown to nearly 20,000 inhabitants, making it one of the largest cities in the German lands. But success brings new challenges. The concentration of advanced industries and skilled workers makes the planned city a target for both competitors and enemies. Traditional craft guilds see it as a threat to their monopolies. Conservative nobles view it as a dangerous example of social innovation that could undermine their authority. Even some church authorities worry that such systematic improvement of material conditions might distract people from spiritual concerns. The crisis comes in 1201, when a coalition of threatened interests attempts to destroy the planned city by military force. The attack is led by Count Heinrich of Nassau, a conservative noble whose own territories have been losing population and wealth to more progressive neighbours. He claims that the city represents a dangerous departure from traditional Christian values and social arrangements. The siege that follows becomes a crucial test of whether technological innovation can survive concentrated opposition from entrenched interests. The city's defences include several of Aelred's innovations: improved fortifications based on mathematical principles, mechanical devices for launching projectiles, and communication systems that allow coordinated responses to attacks. But the real defense comes from the city's inhabitants, who have a direct stake in preserving the community they've helped create. Skilled craftsmen use their technical knowledge to develop new defensive weapons. Merchants organize supply systems that keep the city provisioned throughout the siege. Even ordinary residents contribute by maintaining morale and supporting the defenders. The siege lasts for 3 months, but ultimately fails. The attackers, using traditional medieval siege techniques, prove unable to overcome defenses that incorporate the latest innovations in military engineering. More importantly, the siege attracts support from across Europe, as other progressive nobles and cities recognize that their own interests are threatened by the attack. The successful defense of the planned city marks a turning point in the medieval acceptance of technological innovation. It demonstrates that new technologies and social arrangements can not only improve human life, but also defend themselves against those who would suppress them. The victory encourages other communities to adopt similar innovations and provides a model for how technological progress can be protected from reactionary opposition. By 1205, Aelred's network of innovation centres has grown into something approaching a medieval technology industry. More than 50 centres are operating across Europe and the Mediterranean, employing tens of thousands of people and producing a constant stream of new inventions and improvements. The economic impact is enormous, with regions that have embraced the new technologies experiencing unprecedented prosperity. But perhaps most importantly, the network has created a new class of technically educated professionals who understand both theoretical principles and practical applications. These individuals carry their knowledge to new locations, establishing workshops, training apprentices, and gradually transforming the technological capabilities of medieval society. The cumulative effect is beginning to approach what we might recognize as an early industrial revolution. Water-powered machinery is transforming manufacturing throughout Northern Europe. Improved transportation systems are reducing the cost and time required for long-distance trade. New agricultural techniques are supporting larger populations with less labor. Even communication is being revolutionized by improved writing materials and primitive printing systems. Most remarkably, the pace of innovation itself is accelerating. Each new discovery builds upon previous ones, creating synergistic effects that multiply the impact of individual innovations. The systematic approach to research and development that Aelred has established is proving far more effective than the traditional medieval pattern of isolated craftsmen working in isolation. By 1210, 60 years after Aelred's birth, medieval Europe has been transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. The young man who left Fulda Monastery with nothing but ideas and ambition has become the architect of changes that are reshaping human civilization itself. But as he approaches his 60th birthday, Aelred is beginning to grapple with questions that extend far beyond individual innovations or even systematic technological development. The changes he has set in motion are creating new forms of human organization and new relationships between people and their environment. The implications of these changes will extend far beyond his own lifetime, shaping the future of human civilization in ways that even his visionary mind can barely comprehend. The most profound change is in how people think about the relationship between human beings and the natural world. Traditional medieval thought viewed nature as something to be accepted and endured, with human beings playing a largely passive role in a cosmic order established by divine providence. But Aelred's innovations have demonstrated that human intelligence and effort can systematically improve the material conditions of life. This shift in perspective is creating what we might recognize as early forms of scientific thinking. Instead of accepting natural phenomena as mysterious manifestations of divine will, increasing numbers of people are beginning to investigate them systematically, looking for patterns and principles that can be understood and applied. The change is most visible in the universities, where traditional curricula focused on theology and classical texts are being supplemented by practical studies in mathematics, natural philosophy, and mechanical arts. Students are learning not just to memorize established authorities, but to conduct their own investigations and experiments. The new approach is producing remarkable discoveries. University scholars, working with craftsmen from the innovation centers, are developing improved understanding of mechanics, hydraulics, metallurgy, and other fields that form the foundation of technological development. More importantly, they're establishing methods for systematic investigation that will eventually evolve into modern scientific approaches. But intellectual changes are accompanied by equally profound social and economic transformations. The traditional medieval economy, based primarily on agriculture and local crafts, is being supplemented by new forms of manufacturing and trade that operate on unprecedented scales. Specialized production centers are creating goods for regional and international markets rather than just local consumption. The result is the emergence of what we might recognize as early forms of capitalism. Entrepreneurs are organizing production systems that employ dozens or even hundreds of workers. Investment capital is being accumulated and deployed to fund new ventures. Market mechanisms are beginning to coordinate economic activity across vast distances and diverse populations. These economic changes are creating new social classes and new forms of inequality. Successful entrepreneurs and skilled technicians are achieving wealth and status that rivals that of traditional nobles. But workers whose skills become obsolete are finding themselves marginalized and impoverished. The result is increasing social stratification based on economic rather than hereditary factors. Elred watches these developments with mixed feelings. The innovations he has promoted are indeed improving human life and creating new opportunities for advancement. But they're also creating new forms of hardship and inequality that he hadn't fully anticipated. The systematic approach to technological development that has been so successful in solving technical problems proves much more difficult to apply to social and economic challenges. His response is characteristically ambitious. He begins developing systematic approaches to social innovation that parallel his methods for technological development. Just as he has created networks of centers for technical research, he begins establishing institutions focused on understanding and improving social systems. These social innovation centers bring together scholars, administrators, merchants, and even representatives of workers and peasants to study questions of economic organization, social welfare, and political governance. Their investigations are based on the same principles of systematic observation and experimentation that have proven so successful in technical fields. The results are remarkable. The centers develop new approaches to education that make literacy and numeracy available to much broader segments of the population. They create systems for providing assistance to workers displaced by technological change. They even experiment with new forms of political organization that give ordinary people greater voice in decisions that affect their lives. Most ambitiously, they begin developing what we might recognize as early theories of economic development and social progress. Instead of viewing poverty and ignorance as inevitable features of human existence, they begin to see them as problems that can be systematically addressed through appropriate policies and institutions. These ideas are revolutionary in the context of medieval society, which has traditionally viewed social hierarchy and economic inequality as divinely ordained features of the natural order. The suggestion that human beings can and should work systematically to improve social conditions challenges fundamental assumptions about the relationship between earthly life and spiritual salvation. The response from traditional authorities is predictably hostile. Conservative church leaders denounce the social innovation centers as promoting dangerous ideas about human perfectibility that contradict Christian doctrine about original sin and the fallen nature of humanity. Traditional nobles see them as threats to the hierarchical social order that supports their authority and privileges. But the ideas also find influential supporters. Progressive church leaders argue that working to improve human conditions is a Christian duty, part of humanity's role as stewards of God's creation. Enlightened nobles recognize that prosperous and educated subjects are more valuable than impoverished and ignorant ones. Most importantly, the growing merchant and artisan classes see social innovation as essential to the continued development of the economic systems that support their prosperity. The debate over social innovation becomes as intense and consequential as the earlier debates over technological development. Public disputations are held in universities and cathedrals across Europe. Treatises are written defending and attacking different approaches to social organization. Political leaders find themselves forced to choose between traditional arrangements and new approaches that promise greater prosperity and stability. The resolution comes, characteristically, through practical demonstration rather than theoretical argument. Communities that adopt systematic approaches to social improvement experience measurable benefits: higher literacy rates, better public health, more efficient economic organization, and greater political stability. These practical successes gradually overcome theoretical objections and cultural resistance. By 1215, the year of Magna Carta in England, Aelred's approach to systematic innovation is being applied not just to technical and social problems, but to political ones as well. The Great Charter that English barons forced King John to sign includes provisions that reflect principles developed in the social innovation centres: systematic approaches to legal procedure, protection for economic development, and recognition that political authority should be exercised according to established principles rather than arbitrary will. Similar developments are occurring throughout Europe. The Holy Roman Empire is experimenting with new forms of administrative organization that incorporate systematic approaches to governance. Italian city-states are developing commercial laws that reflect understanding of economic principles. Even the Papal States are adopting administrative reforms based on systematic study of organizational effectiveness. The cumulative effect is a transformation in medieval political culture that parallels the technological and economic changes of the previous decades. Traditional forms of personal and arbitrary authority are being supplemented and sometimes replaced by systematic approaches to governance based on established principles and procedures. This political evolution creates new opportunities for the continued development of innovation networks. Governments that adopt systematic approaches to administration are more likely to support technological and social development. Legal systems that protect property rights and contractual arrangements provide better foundations for entrepreneurship and investment. Educational policies that promote literacy and numeracy create larger pools of people capable of contributing to innovative activities. The positive feedback effects between technological, social, and political innovation accelerate the pace of overall development. By 1220, 70 years after Aelred's birth, medieval Europe is experiencing changes that approach the scale and significance of what our timeline calls the Renaissance, but occurring 3 centuries earlier and with a more systematic and comprehensive character. The transformation is most visible in the great cities that have become centres of the innovation networks. Paris, with its university and multiple innovation centres, has become a hub of intellectual activity that rivals ancient Athens or Alexandria. Venice, with its combination of commercial networks and technological development, dominates Mediterranean trade to an even greater extent than in our timeline. The German cities of the Rhine Valley have formed an economic powerhouse that challenges the traditional dominance of agricultural regions, but perhaps most remarkably, the changes are beginning to spread beyond Europe itself. The innovation networks have established connections with Islamic centers of learning in Spain, Sicily, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Knowledge and techniques are flowing in both directions, creating the first truly international system for technological and intellectual development since the collapse of the Roman Empire. The cross-cultural exchange is producing innovations that neither Christian nor Islamic civilization could have achieved independently. Islamic mathematical and astronomical knowledge is being combined with European mechanical skills to create navigational instruments and timekeeping devices of unprecedented accuracy. European hydraulic engineering is being applied to Islamic agricultural systems, dramatically increasing crop yields in arid regions. Most significantly, the systematic approaches to investigation and experimentation developed in the innovation centers are being adopted and adapted by Islamic scholars, creating new hybrid methodologies that combine the best features of both traditions. These developments are beginning to attract attention from even more distant civilizations. Traders and diplomats from the Byzantine Empire carry reports of European innovations back to Constantinople. Merchants traveling the Silk Road bring news of technological developments to Chinese and Indian centers of learning. Even isolated regions like Scandinavia and the British Isles are beginning to adopt innovations that originated in Elred's network. The global implications of these connections are profound. For the first time since the ancient world, different regions of Eurasia are beginning to participate in systematic exchange of knowledge and techniques. The result is an acceleration in the pace of human development that will reshape the entire course of world history. But as 1225 approaches, marking the 75th year of Elred's life, he is beginning to confront the ultimate questions raised by the transformation he has helped create. The innovations he has promoted have demonstrated that human beings can systematically improve their material conditions and social arrangements. But what are the ultimate goals and limitations of such improvement? How far can and should human beings go in reshaping the world around them? These questions become more than philosophical as the innovation networks develop capabilities that approach what we might consider early forms of industrial technology. Steam engines are being used not just for mining, but for manufacturing and transportation. Mechanical clocks are achieving accuracy that makes possible precise coordination of complex activities. Optical instruments are revealing details of the natural world that were previously invisible to human observation. Most significantly, the systematic approaches to investigation and experimentation are beginning to reveal fundamental principles about the natural world that challenge traditional understanding of humanity's place in the cosmic order. Mathematical analysis of mechanical systems is suggesting that natural phenomena follow predictable laws rather than depending on divine intervention. Astronomical observations are raising questions about the traditional geocentric view of the universe. Even biological investigations are beginning to suggest that living things might be understood as complex but comprehensible systems rather than mysterious manifestations of divine will. These discoveries create both excitement and anxiety among those who understand their implications. The possibilities for further human development seem limitless if natural phenomena really do follow discoverable laws that can be understood and applied. But such a view of nature also seems to diminish the role of divine providence and human dependence on supernatural intervention. Elred finds himself at the center of debates that won't be fully resolved until the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. As the person most responsible for creating the systematic approaches to investigation that are producing these unsettling discoveries, he must grapple with their theological and philosophical implications. His response reveals the wisdom he has gained through decades of navigating medieval culture and politics. Instead of presenting the new discoveries as challenges to traditional religious beliefs, he frames them as deeper insights into the nature of divine creation. God, he argues, has created a universe that operates according to rational principles that human beings can discover and understand. Far from diminishing divine glory, systematic investigation reveals the elegant mathematical relationships and mechanical principles that demonstrate divine wisdom and power. This theological framework proves remarkably successful in maintaining support for continued innovation while avoiding direct confrontation with religious authorities. It allows medieval thinkers to pursue systematic investigation of natural phenomena while remaining within the bounds of Christian orthodoxy. Most importantly, it provides intellectual justification for the continued development of technological capabilities that are reshaping medieval civilization. The theological resolution clears the way for even more ambitious projects. By 1230, LRED's innovation networks are undertaking investigations that approach what we might recognize as early forms of experimental science. Systematic studies of metallurgy are revealing the relationships between temperature, composition, and material properties. Investigations of hydraulics are establishing mathematical principles governing fluid flow and pressure. Even studies of living organisms are beginning to reveal patterns and relationships that suggest underlying natural laws. These investigations are producing practical applications that would have seemed magical to earlier generations. New alloys are creating tools and weapons of unprecedented strength and durability. Improved understanding of hydraulic principles is enabling the construction of water systems that can supply entire cities with clean, pressurized water. Most remarkably, systematic breeding programs are producing crops and livestock with dramatically improved yields and characteristics. But it's the cumulative effect of these innovations that proves most transformative. Medieval Europe is developing what we might recognize as early forms of industrial capability. Water-powered machinery is performing work that previously required hundreds of human laborers. Standardized production methods are creating goods of consistent quality at unprecedented scales. Transportation networks are moving raw materials and finished products across vast distances with efficiency that rivals modern systems. The economic implications are staggering. Regions that have fully embraced the new technologies are experiencing levels of prosperity that exceed anything seen since the height of the Roman Empire. Urban populations are growing rapidly as people migrate from agricultural areas to take advantage of new economic opportunities. Even rural areas are being transformed as improved agricultural techniques free peasants from subsistence farming and allow them to participate in market economies. The social changes are equally profound. Traditional medieval society, organized around hereditary status and agricultural production, is being supplemented by new forms of organization based on skill, education, and economic achievement. Social mobility is increasing dramatically as talented individuals gain access to education and opportunities that allow them to transcend the circumstances of their birth. Most significantly, the innovations are creating new forms of collective organization that transcend traditional boundaries of locality, kinship, and feudal obligation. Craft guilds are evolving into professional associations that span multiple regions and countries. Trading networks are developing into commercial organizations that coordinate economic activity across continents. Even the innovation centers themselves are becoming institutions that unite people from different cultures and backgrounds in common pursuit of knowledge and development. These new forms of organization are proving more effective than traditional medieval institutions at mobilizing human resources for complex projects. When LRED's networks undertake major construction projects, they can coordinate the efforts of thousands of workers across multiple specialties and locations. When they develop new technologies, they can rapidly disseminate innovations throughout their networks, ensuring that improvements are quickly refined and applied. The efficiency of these new organizational forms attracts attention from political leaders who recognize their potential for enhancing state power. Emperor Frederick II, one of the most sophisticated rulers of the medieval period, begins incorporating systematic approaches to administration throughout the Holy Roman Empire. King Louis IX of France establishes royal innovation centers that apply systematic methods to military technology and civil engineering. Most remarkably, Pope Gregory IX issues a series of papal bulls that officially endorse systematic investigation of natural phenomena as a legitimate form of Christian scholarship. The documents, collectively known as the Investigatio Naturae, investigation of nature, provide theological justification for experimental methods and technological development that removes the last major obstacles to widespread innovation. The papal endorsement triggers an explosion of innovative activity throughout Christian Europe. Monasteries establish workshops for developing new agricultural and manufacturing techniques. Universities add practical engineering and experimental investigation to their curricula. Even parish priests begin encouraging their congregations to adopt new technologies and methods that improve their material conditions. By 1235, the transformation of medieval society has reached a critical threshold. The innovations developed over the previous decades have created capabilities that fundamentally alter the relationship between human beings and their environment. People are no longer passive recipients of whatever conditions nature provides, but active agents capable of systematically improving their circumstances. This shift in human capability is accompanied by equally profound changes in outlook and expectation. Instead of viewing their current conditions as divinely ordained and essentially unchangeable, people are beginning to expect continuous improvement in their material welfare and social arrangements. Progress, rather than tradition, is becoming the dominant cultural value. The psychological implications are revolutionary. Medieval culture has traditionally emphasized acceptance of current conditions and focus on spiritual salvation in the afterlife. But the systematic improvements in material conditions are creating new expectations about earthly life and human potential. People are beginning to believe that they can and should work to create better conditions for themselves and their children. These changing expectations create demand for continued innovation and improvement that drives further technological development. Instead of being satisfied with modest improvements, people want dramatic advances that transform their capabilities and opportunities. The result is an acceleration in the pace of change that approaches exponential growth. The acceleration is most visible in the development of new technologies that serve broader military and commercial purposes. By 1240, just 5 years later, the innovation networks are producing weapons and fortification systems that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source: alchemical investigations that began as attempts to understand the properties of different metals. Working with Islamic scholars who have preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek knowledge of chemistry, Elred's researchers discover that certain combinations of materials produce explosive reactions when ignited. The discovery isn't entirely accidental. Systematic investigations of metallurgy have revealed that heating different substances together can produce unexpected results. Chinese knowledge of fireworks, transmitted through the Silk Road trading networks, provides hints about the potential of explosive powders. But it's the methodical approach developed in the innovation centers that transforms these scattered insights into practical applications. The first military use comes in 1241, during a siege of a rebellious lord's castle in the Rhine Valley. Traditional siege techniques would have required months of blockade and bombardment to breach the walls. But engineers from Elred's network have developed primitive cannons that can hurl stone projectiles with devastating force. The castle walls, designed to withstand arrows and catapults, crumble under the impact of cannon fire. The psychological effect is as important as the physical damage. Medieval warfare has been dominated by heavily armoured knights and massive stone fortifications for centuries. The sudden obsolescence of these military technologies sends shockwaves throughout European society. Lords who have based their power on castle fortifications and mounted combat find themselves vulnerable to enemies equipped with the new weapons. But Aelred understands that military applications are just the beginning. The same explosive forces that can demolish castle walls can also be harnessed for peaceful purposes. Mining operations begin using controlled explosions to break through rock formations that would otherwise require months of manual labour. Construction projects employ explosive techniques to clear obstacles and level building sites. Most significantly, the principles underlying explosive reactions suggest possibilities for creating mechanical power that doesn't depend on water wheels or animal labour. If explosive forces can be contained and controlled, they might be used to drive machinery in ways that would revolutionize manufacturing. The theoretical foundation for such applications already exists. Islamic scholars have preserved ancient Greek knowledge of pneumatics and mechanical engineering. Chinese innovations in metallurgy provide techniques for creating vessels strong enough to contain high pressures. European developments in precision metalworking make it possible to manufacture the complex mechanisms required for controlling explosive forces. The first successful steam engine appears in 1243, developed in a workshop near Cologne that has been investigating the relationship between heat, pressure, and mechanical motion. The device is crude by later standards, essentially a large metal vessel in which water is heated by burning wood or coal. The resulting steam pressure drives a piston that can operate hammers, pumps, or other machinery. The immediate applications are limited but significant. The steam engine can operate mills and workshops in locations where water power isn't available. It can pump water from mines that are too deep for traditional methods. Most importantly, it demonstrates that mechanical power can be generated independently of natural forces like flowing water or wind. The implications extend far beyond immediate practical applications. If steam power can be refined and improved, it could eliminate many of the geographical constraints that limit medieval manufacturing. Workshops could be established anywhere fuel is available, rather than only near rivers or windy locations. Production could continue regardless of seasonal variations in water flow or wind patterns. The development attracts intense interest from across Europe and beyond. Delegations of merchants, nobles, and scholars travel to examine the new technology and assess its potential applications. Some visitors are impressed by the possibilities and arrange to fund similar projects in their own territories. Others are skeptical, viewing the steam engine as an interesting curiosity with limited practical value. But a few observers understand the revolutionary potential of what they're witnessing. Among them is a young Franciscan friar named Roger, who has studied mathematics and natural philosophy at the University of Paris. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Roger approaches the steam engine not as an isolated invention, but as evidence of underlying principles that could transform human capabilities. Roger spends months studying the engine's operation, conducting his own experiments with steam pressure and mechanical motion. His investigations lead him to theoretical insights that won't be fully developed in our timeline until the 17th century. He begins to understand that heat, motion, and mechanical work are related through mathematical relationships that can be precisely calculated and predicted. More importantly, Roger recognizes that steam power represents just one application of broader principles governing the conversion of energy from one form to another. If these principles can be fully understood and applied, they could provide the foundation for technologies that surpass even the most ambitious dreams of medieval innovators. His theoretical work, conducted in collaboration with scholars from the innovation networks, begins to develop what we might recognize as early thermodynamics. The investigations combine Islamic mathematical techniques with European experimental methods and Chinese knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry. The result is a systematic understanding of energy conversion that provides the theoretical foundation for continued technological development. By 1245, steam engines are being manufactured in workshops throughout the innovation network. Each new installation incorporates improvements based on accumulated experience and theoretical understanding. The engines become more efficient, more reliable, and more powerful. Equally importantly, they become cheaper to build and operate as manufacturing techniques improve and fuel supply systems develop. The economic impact is immediate and dramatic. Manufacturing centers equipped with steam power can produce goods at scales and speeds that overwhelm competitors using traditional methods. Textile workshops, powered by steam engines, can weave cloth faster and more consistently than hand-operated looms. Metalworking shops can forge tools and weapons with precision and efficiency that amazes contemporary observers. But steam power also enables entirely new forms of manufacturing that would have been impossible with traditional energy sources. Large-scale pottery production becomes feasible when kilns can maintain consistent temperatures regardless of weather conditions. Glass manufacturing achieves new levels of quality and quantity when furnaces can be precisely controlled. Even food processing is revolutionized as steam-powered mills can grind grain, press oils, and preserve foods with unprecedented efficiency. The transformation extends beyond manufacturing to transportation and communication. Steam-powered pumps can drain marshes and regulate water levels in canals, making previously impassable routes navigable year-round. Steam-powered machinery can operate bridges, locks, and harbour facilities with reliability that doesn't depend on human or animal labour. Most ambitiously, investigators begin exploring the possibility of using steam power for locomotion. The theoretical principles are well understood. If steam pressure can drive pistons and gears, it should be possible to create vehicles that move under their own power rather than depending on horses or human effort. The first successful steam-powered vehicle appears in 1248, developed by a team of engineers working near Venice. The device resembles a large wagon equipped with a steam engine, boiler, and fuel storage. It can carry several passengers and substantial cargo while moving at speeds comparable to a walking horse. The vehicle is noisy, smoky, and requires frequent stops for water and fuel, but it demonstrates that self-powered transportation is technically feasible. The demonstration creates enormous excitement among merchants and military leaders who immediately recognize the potential applications. Steam-powered vehicles could transport goods and people across distances where horse-drawn transport is impractical or expensive. They could operate in terrain where animals struggle, such as steep mountain passes or marshy lowlands. Most importantly, they don't require the extensive infrastructure of stables, feed supplies, and animal care that limits traditional transportation. But the early steam vehicles also reveal significant technical challenges that must be solved before the technology can achieve widespread adoption. The engines are heavy and fuel-hungry, limiting their range and cargo capacity. The boilers require constant attention to maintain safe operating pressures. The mechanical systems are complex and prone to breakdowns that require skilled technicians to repair. Solving these problems requires systematic investigation of metallurgy, thermodynamics, and mechanical engineering that pushes medieval technology to its limits. Stronger and lighter metals must be developed to build more efficient engines. Better understanding of heat transfer and pressure dynamics is needed to improve boiler design. More sophisticated manufacturing techniques are required to produce the precision components that reliable steam systems demand. The investigations attract the most talented engineers and scholars from throughout the innovation networks. Working in collaborative teams that combine theoretical knowledge with practical experience, they begin making rapid progress on the technical challenges. New alloys provide materials with better strength-to-weight ratios. Improved understanding of combustion leads to more efficient fuel systems. Advanced manufacturing techniques enable the production of precision components with tolerances that approach modern standards. By 1250, exactly 100 years after Aelred's birth, steam technology has evolved to the point where practical applications are becoming economically viable. Steam-powered manufacturing is spreading throughout the innovation networks, transforming production capabilities in ways that create unprecedented prosperity. Steam transportation is beginning to supplement traditional methods, opening new possibilities for trade and travel. But perhaps most importantly, the systematic approaches to technological development pioneered by Aelred have created institutional and cultural foundations that ensure continued innovation. The networks of research centers, training institutions, and manufacturing facilities provide infrastructure for sustained technological advancement. The collaborative methods that bring together scholars and craftsmen from different cultures and disciplines create intellectual frameworks that accelerate discovery and development. The cultural changes are equally profound. Medieval society has traditionally viewed technological innovation with suspicion, seeing it as potentially dangerous interference with divine providence. But the practical benefits of systematic innovation have gradually overcome these concerns, creating new cultural values that celebrate human creativity and problem solving. Educational institutions are adapting their curricula to include practical engineering and experimental investigation alongside traditional theological and classical studies. Young people are increasingly choosing careers in technical fields rather than limiting themselves to agriculture, warfare, or religious life. Even social status is beginning to reflect technical competence and innovative achievement rather than just hereditary rank or military prowess. The political implications are equally significant. Traditional medieval governance, based on personal relationships and customary practices, is proving inadequate for managing the complex technological and economic systems that are emerging. New forms of administration are developing that rely on systematic record-keeping, standardized procedures, and professional expertise. These administrative innovations are spreading throughout European political systems as rulers recognize their advantages for managing increasingly sophisticated societies. Legal systems are adapting to address questions of intellectual property, technological safety, and commercial relationships that didn't exist in traditional medieval law. Even military organization is being transformed as new weapons and transportation systems require different tactics and logistical approaches. The cumulative effect of these changes is beginning to approach what historians will later recognize as the transition from medieval to early modern society. But in this timeline, the transition is occurring 3 centuries earlier than in our history, and with a more systematic and comprehensive character that suggests even more dramatic transformations ahead. International relationships are also being reshaped by the new technologies. European states that have embraced innovation are gaining significant advantages over those that resist change. The economic prosperity generated by advanced manufacturing creates resources for military expansion and diplomatic influence. The transportation and communication improvements enable more effective coordination of international activities. Most significantly, the technological capabilities are beginning to attract attention from beyond Europe itself. Traders and diplomats carry news of European innovations to Islamic centers of learning, Chinese imperial courts, and other advanced civilizations. Some of these societies begin adopting European techniques, while others respond by accelerating their own innovative activities. The result is an increasingly competitive international environment where technological advancement becomes crucial for maintaining political and economic independence. Societies that fail to innovate find themselves at growing disadvantages in trade, warfare, and diplomatic influence. The pressure for continued technological development becomes a driving force that accelerates the pace of change throughout the known world. By 1255, the global implications of the transformation are becoming clear. What began as individual innovations in medieval Europe has evolved into a systematic approach to technological development that is reshaping human civilization. The principles and methods pioneered by Aelred are spreading throughout Eurasia, creating the first truly global technological revolution in human history. The changes are particularly dramatic in Islamic regions, where advanced mathematical and scientific traditions provide fertile ground for adopting and improving European innovations. Islamic scholars in Spain, Sicily, and the Eastern Mediterranean begin establishing their own innovation centers modeled on European examples. The combination of Islamic theoretical knowledge with European practical methods produces hybrid approaches that advance both traditions. Chinese civilization, with its sophisticated manufacturing capabilities and administrative systems, proves especially adept at scaling up European innovations for mass production. Chinese workshops begin producing steam engines, precision instruments, and other advanced technologies in quantities that far exceed European capabilities. But they also contribute their own innovations, particularly in metallurgy and chemical processing. that enhance the overall technological development. The cross-cultural exchange accelerates as improved transportation and communication systems make long-distance contact more feasible. By 1260, regular trade routes connect European innovation centers with Islamic schools in Cordoba and Baghdad, Chinese workshops in Beijing and Hangzhou, and even Indian centers of learning in Delhi and Bangalore. Knowledge and techniques flow rapidly between these centers, creating synergistic effects that multiply the pace of innovation. The most dramatic example comes in 1262, when a collaborative project involving European, Islamic, and Chinese investigators succeeds in developing what they call a celestial engine, essentially a primitive rocket capable of reaching unprecedented altitudes. The device combines European understanding of explosive chemistry with Islamic mathematical calculation of trajectories and Chinese expertise in metallurgy and precision manufacturing. The successful rocket launch, conducted at a site near Venice in the presence of observers from across the known world, demonstrates that human beings can potentially transcend the earthly limitations that have constrained them throughout history. While the immediate practical applications are limited, the psychological impact is enormous. For the first time, serious thinkers begin to consider the possibility that human technology might eventually enable travel beyond the Earth itself. The rocket experiment also demonstrates the power of international collaboration in advancing technological capabilities. The project required knowledge and skills that no single culture possessed independently. Only by combining the best insights from multiple traditions were the investigators able to achieve their ambitious goal. This lesson isn't lost on political leaders who are beginning to recognize that technological competition requires cooperation as well as rivalry. By the 1260s, formal agreements are being negotiated between European states, Islamic Emirates, and Chinese provinces to facilitate the exchange of scholars, techniques, and resources for mutual benefit. The most significant of these agreements is the Treaty of Constantinople, signed in 1265 between the Byzantine Empire, several Italian city-states, and various Islamic powers. The treaty establishes formal procedures for sharing technological innovations while protecting the interests of the societies that develop them. It creates international standards for weights, measures, and technical specifications that facilitate trade in advanced manufactured goods. Most importantly, the treaty establishes the principle that technological knowledge should be considered a form of international wealth that benefits all humanity rather than a strategic resource to be hoarded by individual societies. This principle, revolutionary in the context of medieval international relations, provides the foundation for continued global cooperation in technological development. The impact of international collaboration becomes apparent almost immediately. Projects that would have taken decades for individual societies to complete can be accomplished in years through coordinated efforts. Technical problems that stymie investigators in one culture are often quickly solved by scholars from different traditions who approach the same issues from alternative perspectives. By 1270, 20 years after the first steam engine, the pace of technological development has accelerated to levels that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. Steam power is being applied to an ever-expanding range of applications, from manufacturing to transportation to construction. But steam represents just one thread in a fabric of innovations that are transforming every aspect of human life. Precision manufacturing techniques are producing tools, instruments, and machinery with accuracy that approaches modern standards. Advanced metallurgy is creating materials with properties that enable entirely new categories of construction and engineering. Improved understanding of mathematics and natural philosophy is providing theoretical foundations for technologies that push the boundaries of what medieval minds thought possible. Perhaps most significantly, the systematic approaches to innovation are being applied to social and political problems as well as technical ones. Educational systems are being redesigned to produce larger numbers of technically skilled individuals. Economic institutions are being restructured to support the investment and coordination required for complex technological projects. Even governance systems are being modified to accommodate the rapid changes that technological development creates. The results are visible throughout the regions that have embraced systematic innovation. Populations are growing as improved agriculture and manufacturing provide better nutrition and living conditions. Cities are expanding as new economic opportunities attract migrants from rural areas. Trade networks are extending to previously isolated regions as transportation improvements make long-distance commerce more feasible. But the changes also create new challenges and tensions. Traditional social hierarchies are being disrupted as technical skills become more valuable than hereditary status. Economic relationships are being transformed as manufacturing capabilities shift the balance between different types of work. Even cultural values are changing as people experience unprecedented improvements in their material conditions. The most dramatic tensions arise between regions that have embraced innovation and those that resist it. By 1275, the economic and military advantages of technological development have become so pronounced that societies without access to advanced innovations find themselves at severe disadvantages. This creates pressure for rapid technological adoption that often overwhelms traditional social and cultural systems. The crisis comes to a head in the 1280s, when several conservative European nobles attempt to form an alliance aimed at suppressing technological innovation and restoring traditional medieval society. The alliance, led by powerful lords who feel threatened by the economic and social changes, launches a coordinated attack on innovation centers throughout Northern Europe. The conflict that follows becomes known as the War of Progress, a struggle that ultimately determines whether technological advancement will continue or be suppressed by traditional authorities. The war pits conservative forces armed with traditional medieval weapons against progressive armies equipped with steam-powered artillery, advanced metallurgical weapons, and sophisticated logistical systems. The outcome is decisive. Despite their initial advantages in numbers and territorial control, the conservative forces prove unable to compete with enemies who possess superior technology and organizational capabilities. Steam-powered artillery destroys castle fortifications that have stood for centuries. Advanced transportation systems enable rapid movement of troops and supplies across vast distances. Most importantly, the economic prosperity generated by technological innovation provides resources for sustained military campaigns that traditional feudal levies cannot match. The victory of progressive forces in the War of Progress marks a turning point in European history. Traditional feudalism, already weakened by economic and social changes, collapses as a viable system of political organization. New forms of governance emerge that are better adapted to managing technologically advanced societies. But the war also demonstrates that technological development requires political and social systems capable of supporting it. The most successful post-war societies are those that combine technological innovation with effective governance, education, and economic organization. Societies that attempt to adopt new technologies without adapting their institutions often experience instability and conflict. By 1290, 40 years after the first steam engine, the transformation of European society is essentially complete. The medieval world of agricultural villages, feudal hierarchies, and craft guilds has been replaced by a more complex and dynamic system based on manufacturing, commerce, and technological innovation. The changes have been so comprehensive that they constitute what historians will later recognize as the beginning of the early modern period. But the transformation is just beginning to reveal its ultimate implications. The systematic approaches to innovation pioneered by Aelred have created not just new technologies, but new ways of thinking about human capabilities and possibilities. The success of steam power, precision manufacturing, and international collaboration suggest that even more ambitious projects might be feasible. The most visionary thinkers are beginning to consider possibilities that extend far beyond immediate practical applications. If human beings can harness steam power and create precision machinery, might they eventually develop technologies that enable flight? If they can coordinate international collaboration on complex projects, might they eventually organize efforts to explore distant lands or even celestial bodies? These questions seem fantastical to most contemporary observers, but they reflect a fundamental shift in human expectations about technological possibility. Instead of viewing their current capabilities as essentially fixed, people are beginning to believe that continued innovation can transcend almost any limitation. The shift in expectations creates demand for even more ambitious technological projects. By the 1290s, investigators are working on problems that won't be seriously addressed in our timeline until the Renaissance or later. Teams of scholars and craftsmen are investigating the principles of flight, studying birds, and developing theoretical models of aerodynamics. Other groups are exploring the properties of electricity, building on Islamic and Chinese knowledge of magnetic phenomena. Most ambitiously, the international collaboration established through the innovation networks enables projects that require resources and expertise beyond what any single society could provide. The construction of precision astronomical instruments involves craftsmen from multiple cultures working to tolerances that push medieval manufacturing to its limits. The development of advanced metallurgical techniques requires coordination between miners, chemists, and engineers from different continents. The cumulative effect of these investigations is an acceleration in the pace of discovery that approaches exponential growth. Each new breakthrough provides foundations for additional innovations that multiply the overall rate of technological development. The systematic approaches to research and development ensure that discoveries are quickly refined, applied, and disseminated throughout the global network of innovation centers. By 1300, exactly 150 years after Aelred's birth, the world has been transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible to medieval observers. Steam power has revolutionized manufacturing, transportation, and construction throughout much of Eurasia. Precision manufacturing has created tools and instruments that enable entirely new categories of investigation and development. International collaboration has accelerated the pace of innovation while spreading its benefits across multiple cultures and societies. But perhaps most importantly, the systematic approaches to technological development have become embedded in the institutional and cultural foundations of advanced societies. Universities teach experimental methods alongside traditional scholarly subjects. Governments support innovation centers as essential infrastructure for economic and military competitiveness. Even religious institutions have adapted their doctrines to accommodate the reality of rapid technological change. The cultural transformation may be even more significant than the technological one. Medieval society's traditional emphasis on accepting current conditions and focusing on spiritual salvation has been supplemented by new values that celebrate human creativity and material progress. People expect continuous improvement in their living conditions and believe that technological innovation can solve most practical problems. This shift in cultural values creates a self-reinforcing cycle that accelerates technological development. Societies that embrace innovation attract the most talented individuals and receive the resources necessary for ambitious projects. The success of these societies demonstrates the benefits of technological advancement, encouraging even more investment in research and development. The global implications of this cultural transformation are profound. By 1300, technological innovation has become a primary determinant of international power and influence. Societies that master advanced manufacturing techniques dominate trade networks. States with superior military technologies expand their territories and influence. Even cultural and religious movements spread more effectively when they adopt advanced communication and transportation systems. The result is an increasingly competitive international environment where continued innovation becomes essential for survival and prosperity. Societies that fail to keep pace with technological development find themselves marginalized and vulnerable. The pressure for advancement creates a global race for technological superiority that drives continued acceleration in the pace of change. This competitive dynamic is beginning to produce innovations that approach what we might recognize as early modern or even industrial technologies. By 1305, steam engines have evolved to the point where they can power ocean-going ships, eliminating dependence on wind and current for long-distance maritime travel. Precision manufacturing has developed to levels that enable the production of complex mechanical devices, including sophisticated clocks, optical instruments, and even primitive calculating machines. Most remarkably, the combination of advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, and systematic investigation is beginning to produce insights into electricity and magnetism that won't be achieved in our timeline until the 18th century. Investigators working in innovation centers from Spain to China are discovering that certain materials can generate mysterious forces that affect other objects at a distance. The electrical investigations remain largely theoretical, but they suggest possibilities for technologies that could revolutionize communication and even transportation. If electrical forces can be understood and controlled, they might provide alternatives to steam power that are more efficient and versatile. They might even enable forms of long-distance communication that operate faster than the swiftest messenger. These possibilities seem fantastical to most contemporary observers, but the track record of the innovation networks has demonstrated that systematic investigation can achieve results that initially appear impossible. The combination of theoretical understanding with practical experimentation has repeatedly produced technologies that exceed the expectations of even the most optimistic visionaries. The success of the systematic approach to innovation has also attracted attention from the most powerful political and religious leaders of the age. By 1310, Pope Clement V has issued a series of papal bulls officially endorsing technological development as consistent with Christian doctrine and beneficial to human welfare. The Holy Roman Emperor and the kings of France and England have established royal innovation centers that apply systematic methods to military and civil engineering. Most significantly, the Mongol Empire, which by this time controls vast territories from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean, has begun adopting and adapting European innovations throughout its domains. The combination of Mongol organizational capabilities with advanced European technologies creates possibilities for projects on scales that dwarf anything previously attempted. The most ambitious of these projects is the construction of a comprehensive transportation network that connects the major cities of Eurasia through improved roads, canals, and even primitive railways. The project, begun in 1312, represents the largest coordinated engineering effort in human history up to that time. It requires the collaboration of engineers, workers, and administrators from dozens of different cultures and societies. The Transportation Network project demonstrates both the potential and the challenges of large-scale technological development. When successful, it creates economic and social benefits that transform entire regions. Improved transportation reduces the cost and time required for trade, enabling specialization and economic development that weren't previously feasible. It also facilitates the movement of people and ideas, accelerating cultural exchange and technological diffusion. But the project also reveals the enormous resources and coordination required for ambitious technological undertakings. The construction requires unprecedented quantities of materials, from iron and stone to more exotic substances needed for advanced machinery. It demands skilled workers in numbers that strain the educational and training systems of even the most advanced societies. Most challenging of all, it requires political cooperation between societies that have traditionally been rivals or enemies. The success of the project depends on maintaining agreements between the Mongol Empire, various European states, Islamic Emirates, and Chinese provinces despite their conflicting interests and competing ambitions. The challenges prove manageable largely because the benefits of cooperation have become so obvious that political leaders recognize their mutual interests in continued technological development. By 1315, the first sections of the transcontinental transportation network are becoming operational, demonstrating that coordinated international efforts can achieve results that individual societies could never accomplish independently. The success encourages even more ambitious collaborative projects. Plans are developed for comprehensive communication networks that could transmit messages across continents in days rather than months. Proposals are made for coordinated scientific investigations that would systematically explore the natural world using resources and expertise from multiple cultures. Most remarkably, serious consideration begins to be given to projects that extend beyond terrestrial limitations entirely. The successful rocket experiments of the 1260s have been followed by continued improvements in understanding of ballistics, propulsion, and materials science. By 1320, theoretical investigations suggest that it might eventually be possible to create vehicles capable of traveling beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Such possibilities seem fantastical to most people, but they reflect the profound shift in human expectations that systematic technological development has created. Instead of viewing current capabilities as essentially fixed, people are beginning to believe that continued innovation can transcend almost any limitation. The shift in expectations is perhaps most visible among young people who have grown up in the transformed world of the early 14th century. Unlike their grandparents, who lived in traditional medieval society, these individuals take technological innovation for granted. They expect continuous improvement in their capabilities and opportunities, and they approach problems with confidence that systematic investigation can find solutions. This generational change ensures that the momentum of technological development will continue, even if specific individuals like Aelred are no longer active. The systematic approaches to innovation have become embedded in educational, economic, and political institutions that will persist beyond any individual lifetime. By 1325, 75 years after Aelred's birth, the transformation he helped initiate has fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization. What began as individual innovations in medieval Europe has evolved into a global technological revolution that is reshaping every aspect of human life. The systematic approaches to innovation have created capabilities that approach what we might recognize as early industrial technology, but occurring 3 centuries earlier than in our timeline. The most visible manifestation of this transformation is the emergence of what contemporary observers call engine cities, urban centers built around clusters of steam-powered manufacturing facilities. These cities represent entirely new forms of human settlement, designed from the ground up to accommodate large-scale industrial production. Unlike traditional medieval cities that grew organically around markets or defensive positions, engine cities are planned communities that integrate manufacturing, housing, transportation, and waste management into comprehensive systems. The first and largest of these cities is New Cologne, established in 1320 on the Rhine River downstream from the original city. Designed by a team of engineers trained in Aelred's innovation centers, New Cologne incorporates advanced urban planning principles that won't be seen again until the industrial cities of the 19th century. The city is laid out on a rational grid pattern with wide streets designed to accommodate steam-powered vehicles. Manufacturing districts are separated from residential areas to reduce pollution and noise. Most remarkably, the entire city is supplied with pressurized water and connected to a comprehensive sewer system that maintains sanitation standards far superior to traditional medieval cities. New Cologne's population grows from 0 to nearly 50,000 within 5 years, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. The rapid growth attracts people from across the continent, creating a cosmopolitan community that transcends traditional boundaries of nationality, religion, and social class. Skilled craftsmen work alongside university-trained engineers. Merchants from Venice collaborate with scholars from Paris. Even peasants who have learned to operate steam-powered machinery achieve social status that would have been impossible in traditional feudal society. The social changes are as profound as the technological ones. Traditional medieval society organized people into rigid hierarchies based on birth, land ownership, and military service. But the engine cities create new forms of social organization based on skill, education, and economic contribution. Social mobility increases dramatically as talented individuals gain access to opportunities that allow them to transcend their origins. The transformation is particularly significant for women, who find new opportunities in the engine cities that weren't available in traditional medieval society. The precision manufacturing that steam-powered machinery enables often requires dexterity and attention to detail rather than physical strength. Women prove especially capable at operating textile machinery, assembling precision instruments, and managing complex production processes. For the first time in European history, significant numbers of women achieve economic independence through their own labor, rather than dependence on male family members. The changes extend beyond Europe to societies throughout Eurasia that have adopted similar approaches to technological development. Islamic cities in Spain and the Eastern Mediterranean establish their own engine districts that combine European steam technology with traditional Islamic architecture and urban planning. Chinese cities integrate steam-powered manufacturing with their sophisticated administrative systems, creating industrial capabilities that exceed anything else in the world. Most remarkably, the Mongol Empire uses its vast territorial extent and organizational capabilities to create an integrated industrial system that spans continents. Raw materials extracted in Siberia are processed in workshops in Central Asia and assembled into finished products in factories near the Baltic Sea. The scale of coordination required for such operations forces the development of administrative and communication systems that approach modern standards of complexity and efficiency. By 1330, the global network of engine cities and manufacturing centers is producing goods in quantities and qualities that amaze contemporary observers. Textiles woven by steam-powered looms are finer and more consistent than anything produced by traditional hand methods. Metal tools forged with precision machinery are stronger and more durable than weapons made by the most skilled traditional smiths. Even everyday items like pottery, glass, and furniture are being manufactured with standardization and quality control that creates entirely new expectations for material culture. The economic implications are staggering. The productivity gains from steam-powered manufacturing reduce the cost of manufactured goods to levels that make them accessible to much broader segments of the population. Items that were once luxury goods available only to the wealthy become commonplace possessions for ordinary working people. The result is an improvement in living standards that begins to approach what we might recognize as middle-class prosperity. But increased productivity also creates new economic challenges. The same steam-powered machinery that enables unprecedented manufacturing capabilities also reduces the human labor required for production. Traditional craftsmen find their skills obsolete as machines can perform their work faster and more consistently. Even agricultural workers face displacement as improved farming techniques reduce the labor needed for food production. The response to these challenges reveals the sophisticated understanding of economic systems that the innovation networks have developed. Instead of viewing technological unemployment as an inevitable consequence of progress, investigators begin developing systematic approaches to economic transition that protect displaced workers while maximizing the benefits of increased productivity. The solutions include comprehensive education and training programs that help traditional craftsmen acquire skills needed for operating and maintaining steam-powered machinery. Retraining workshops are established where displaced craftsmen can learn to design, build, and maintain the new mechanical systems. Investment funds are created to help traditional workers establish their own small manufacturing operations using the new technologies. Most innovatively, the economic theorists working in the innovation centers begin developing concepts that won't be formally articulated until Adam Smith writes about market economics in the 18th century. They recognize that increased productivity creates wealth that can benefit everyone if properly distributed, but that market mechanisms alone may not achieve optimal outcomes. The result is early experiments with what we might recognize as social welfare systems, designed to ensure that the benefits of technological progress are shared broadly throughout society. By 1335, these economic innovations are proving as transformative as the technological ones. Societies that successfully manage the transition to steam-powered manufacturing experience unprecedented prosperity, without the massive social disruption that might otherwise accompany such rapid change. Workers who might have been displaced by machinery instead become operators, maintainers, and designers of increasingly sophisticated systems. The success of these economic policies encourages even more ambitious social innovations. Educational systems are redesigned to provide universal literacy and numeracy, ensuring that all citizens can participate in an increasingly technical economy. Healthcare systems are developed that apply systematic approaches to preventing and treating disease, dramatically reducing mortality rates and improving quality of life. Most remarkably, political systems begin adapting to accommodate the new social and economic realities. Traditional feudalism, with its emphasis on personal loyalty and land-based wealth, proves inadequate for governing societies based on manufacturing, trade, and technological innovation. New forms of governance emerge that combine traditional monarchical authority with systematic administration and popular participation. The political evolution is perhaps most advanced in the Italian city-states, where commercial wealth has already weakened traditional feudal relationships. Cities like Venice, Genoa, and Florence develop governmental systems that integrate traditional merchant councils with new institutions representing skilled craftsmen, engineers, and other technical professionals. The result is a form of mixed government that balances different interests while maintaining the flexibility needed for continued innovation. Similar political experiments are occurring throughout the regions that have embraced technological development. The Holy Roman Empire establishes imperial innovation councils that coordinate technological policy across multiple territories. The French monarchy creates royal academies that combine scientific investigation with practical engineering. Even the English crown begins experimenting with parliamentary systems that give technical professionals a voice in national policy. The cumulative effect of these political innovations is the emergence of what we might recognize as early forms of technocratic governance. Traditional medieval politics, based on personal relationships and customary practices, is being supplemented by systematic approaches to administration that rely on expertise, data, and rational analysis. The change doesn't eliminate traditional authority structures, but it makes them more effective and responsive to the needs of technologically advanced societies. By 1340, 90 years after Aelred's birth, the transformation he helped initiate has created a world that would be barely recognizable to his medieval contemporaries. Steam power has revolutionized manufacturing, transportation, and construction throughout much of Europe and beyond. Precision manufacturing has enabled the production of complex mechanical devices that approach early modern standards of sophistication. Most importantly, systematic approaches to innovation have become embedded in the institutional and cultural foundations of advanced societies. But perhaps the most significant change is in human expectations and capabilities. Medieval people traditionally accepted their material conditions as essentially fixed, focusing their hopes on spiritual salvation in the afterlife. But the success of technological innovation has demonstrated that human beings can systematically improve their circumstances through intelligence, effort, and cooperation. This shift in expectations is creating demand for even more ambitious projects. By the 1340s, investigators are seriously exploring possibilities that extend far beyond traditional terrestrial limitations. Advanced understanding of mechanics and materials science suggests that human flight might be achievable. Investigations of electrical phenomena hint at entirely new forms of power and communication. Most remarkably, continued improvements in rocket technology raise the theoretical possibility of travel beyond the Earth's atmosphere. These possibilities seem fantastical to most contemporary observers, but the track record of systematic innovation has demonstrated that persistent investigation can achieve results that initially appear impossible. The combination of theoretical understanding with practical experimentation has repeatedly produced technologies that exceed even optimistic expectations. The success of terrestrial innovations encourages increasingly ambitious investigations of celestial possibilities. By 1345, collaborative teams involving scholars from multiple cultures are conducting systematic studies of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that approach what we might recognize as early aerospace research. They're developing theoretical models of planetary motion, calculating the forces required for escape from Earth's gravitational influence, and designing propulsion systems that could potentially achieve the necessary performance. The investigations remain largely theoretical, but they represent a fundamental shift in human thinking about the boundaries of possibility. Instead of viewing the heavens as completely separate from earthly concerns, people are beginning to consider them as potential destinations for human exploration and development. This expansion of human ambition reflects the broader cultural transformation that technological innovation has created. Medieval society traditionally emphasized humility, acceptance, and focus on spiritual rather than material concerns. But the success of systematic innovation has created new cultural values that celebrate human creativity, ambition, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. The cultural changes are particularly visible in educational institutions, which are adapting their curricula to reflect the new priorities. Universities that once focused exclusively on theology and classical texts now include comprehensive programs in mathematics, natural philosophy, and practical engineering. Students learn experimental methods alongside traditional scholarly approaches. Most importantly, they're encouraged to question established authorities and pursue original investigations. The educational transformation is producing a new generation of scholars and innovators who take technological progress for granted and approach problems with confidence that systematic investigation can find solutions. These individuals are less constrained by traditional assumptions about human limitations and more willing to pursue ambitious projects that might have seemed impossible to earlier generations. By 1350, exactly 2 centuries after Aelred's birth, this new generation is beginning to achieve results that fulfill the most optimistic predictions of earlier innovators. Steam technology has evolved to levels that approach early industrial standards, with engines powerful enough to drive large manufacturing facilities and transportation systems. Precision manufacturing has developed to the point where complex mechanical devices can be produced with reliability and consistency that enables mass production. Most remarkably, the systematic approaches to innovation have begun producing insights into electricity and magnetism that won't be achieved in our timeline until the 18th century. Investigators working in collaboration across multiple cultures have discovered that electrical forces can be generated, stored, and transmitted through specially designed apparatus. While practical applications remain limited, the theoretical implications suggest possibilities for technologies that could revolutionize communication, transportation, and manufacturing. The electrical investigations are particularly significant because they demonstrate the power of international collaboration in advancing human knowledge. The discoveries require theoretical insights from Islamic mathematics, practical techniques from European mechanics, and materials knowledge from Chinese metallurgy. No single culture possesses all the necessary elements, but their combination through the global innovation networks produces results that none could achieve independently. The success of collaborative investigation encourages even more ambitious international projects. By 1355, formal agreements exist between European states, Islamic Emirates, Chinese provinces, and Mongol territories for coordinated research into advanced technologies. The agreements establish common standards for measurements, materials, and technical specifications that facilitate the exchange of knowledge and components between different regions. Most significantly, the agreements create funding mechanisms that enable projects requiring resources beyond what any single society can provide. The construction of advanced astronomical instruments, the development of precision manufacturing capabilities, and the investigation of electrical phenomena all require investments on scales that approach what we might recognize as early forms of international scientific collaboration. The results of these collaborative efforts are becoming visible throughout the advanced regions of Eurasia. By 1360, steam-powered ships are operating regular schedules between European ports and Asian trading centers, reducing travel times that previously required months to mere weeks. Precision manufactured goods are being traded across continents, creating the first truly global markets for high-quality manufactured products. Most remarkably, primitive electrical communication systems are beginning to connect major cities across vast distances. The systems use techniques that won't be rediscovered in our timeline until the telegraph, but they're based on theoretical understanding and practical capabilities that the innovation networks have developed through systematic investigation. Messages can be transmitted across hundreds of miles in hours rather than days, revolutionizing commerce, diplomacy, and military coordination. The communication breakthrough has implications that extend far beyond immediate practical applications. For the first time in human history, it becomes possible to coordinate activities across continental distances with precision and reliability. The result is an acceleration in the pace of economic and political development that creates new possibilities for human organization and achievement. By 1365, the global networks of advanced societies are beginning to function as integrated systems rather than collections of independent entities. Economic specialization reaches levels where entire regions focus on particular types of production, while depending on distant suppliers for other necessities. Political coordination enables collaborative responses to challenges that affect multiple societies simultaneously. Most importantly, technological development begins operating as a truly global enterprise. Innovations developed in one region are rapidly transmitted to research centers throughout the network, where they're refined, improved, and combined with local knowledge to produce even more advanced capabilities. The result is an acceleration in the pace of progress that approaches exponential growth. The acceleration is most visible in transportation technology, which by 1370 includes not only steam-powered ships and land vehicles, but also serious experiments with human flight. Systematic studies of aerodynamics, based on mathematical analysis of bird flight and wind patterns, have produced theoretical understanding of the principles governing airborne motion. Combined with advanced materials, science, and precision manufacturing, this knowledge is beginning to enable construction of devices capable of carrying human beings through the air. The first successful flight occurs in 1372, when a team of investigators near Florence launches a glider capable of carrying a human pilot for several minutes of controlled flight. The device uses principles that won't be rediscovered in our timeline until the Wright brothers, but it's based on theoretical understanding and practical capabilities that the innovation networks have developed through decades of systematic investigation. The flight demonstration creates enormous excitement throughout the advanced societies, but it also raises questions about the ultimate implications of human technological capability. If people can fly like birds, what other natural limitations might they eventually transcend? The success of flight technology encourages even more ambitious investigations of possibilities that extend beyond traditional terrestrial boundaries. By 1375, Serious theoretical work is being conducted on the possibility of travel beyond Earth's atmosphere. The mathematical understanding of orbital mechanics, combined with continued improvements in rocket technology, suggests that it might eventually be possible to create vehicles capable of reaching celestial bodies. While such possibilities remain largely theoretical, they represent a fundamental expansion in human thinking about the scope of potential achievement. The expansion of human ambition is perhaps most significant for its psychological and cultural implications. Traditional medieval society viewed human beings as small and insignificant creatures in a vast cosmos controlled by divine providence. But the success of technological innovation has demonstrated that human intelligence and effort can achieve results that approach what earlier generations would have considered miraculous. This shift in self-perception creates new expectations about human potential and responsibility. Instead of viewing themselves as passive recipients of whatever fate provides, people are beginning to see themselves as active agents capable of shaping their own destinies and improving conditions for future generations. The change in perspective is particularly visible among young people who have grown up in the transformed world of the late 14th century. Unlike their ancestors, who lived in traditional medieval society, these individuals take technological progress for granted and approach problems with confidence that systematic investigation can find solutions. By 1380, this new generation is beginning to assume leadership positions in the advanced societies, bringing with them attitudes and expectations that will shape the future direction of human development. They're less constrained by traditional assumptions about human limitations and more willing to pursue ambitious projects that might have seemed impossible to earlier generations. The most ambitious of these projects involve systematic exploration of possibilities that extend beyond Earth itself. By 1385, theoretical investigations of space travel have advanced to the point where serious proposals are being developed for expeditions to the Moon and other celestial bodies. While the technical challenges remain enormous, the systematic approaches to innovation that have proven successful for terrestrial projects suggest that even these ambitious goals might eventually be achievable. The proposals attract support from the most advanced societies, which recognize that success in such endeavors could provide decisive advantages in the increasingly competitive international environment. By 1390, coordinated international efforts are underway to develop the theoretical understanding and practical capabilities required for space exploration. The space exploration projects represent the ultimate expression of the transformation that began with Eldred's innovations 2.5 centuries earlier. What started as individual improvements to medieval technology has evolved into a systematic approach to innovation that is reshaping human civilization itself. The principles and methods pioneered by a single visionary individual have created capabilities that approach what we might recognize as early space-age technology, but occurring centuries earlier than in our timeline. By 1400, exactly 250 years after Eldred's birth, the world he helped create has transcended almost every limitation that constrained medieval society. Steam power and precision manufacturing have revolutionized production capabilities. Advanced transportation and communication systems have created global networks of unprecedented integration. Most remarkably, systematic approaches to innovation have become embedded in the cultural and institutional foundations of human civilization. But perhaps most importantly, the transformation has created new expectations about human potential that will continue driving progress long after the specific technologies of Eldred's era have been superseded. The demonstration that systematic innovation can transcend apparently insurmountable limitations has established precedents and principles that will guide human development for centuries to come. As we reach the end of our journey through this alternative timeline, we're left to contemplate what might have been. In our actual history, the systematic approaches to innovation that we've imagined don't emerge until the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. The Industrial Revolution doesn't begin until the 18th century. Space exploration doesn't become reality until the 20th century. But in this imagined world, where a single visionary mind was born into medieval circumstances, these developments occurred centuries earlier. The cumulative effect would have been a fundamental acceleration in the pace of human development that could have reshaped the entire course of world history. Instead of the gradual emergence of modern technology over several centuries, we might have seen the equivalent of industrial and even space-age capabilities emerging in what we know as the medieval period. The implications extend far beyond technology itself. The social, economic, and political transformations that would have accompanied such rapid technological development might have created forms of human organization and international cooperation that transcend anything we've achieved in our actual timeline. The early emergence of global communication and transportation networks could have prevented many of the conflicts and misunderstandings that have characterized human history. Most intriguingly, the early development of space exploration capabilities might have opened entirely new chapters in human development that we can barely imagine. If systematic investigation of celestial possibilities had begun in the 14th century rather than the 20th, human civilization might have achieved interplanetary capabilities by the time our actual timeline reached the Renaissance. Of course, such speculations remain purely theoretical. We can never know with certainty how history might have unfolded differently, or whether the social and cultural conditions of medieval Europe could have supported the kind of sustained technological development we've imagined. What we can say is that the systematic approaches to innovation that eventually did transform human civilization were not inevitable products of historical development, but rather the result of particular individuals and circumstances that might have emerged at different times and places. The story of our imagined medieval innovator reminds us that history is not predetermined, that individual vision and effort can have consequences that extend far beyond their immediate circumstances. It suggests that the transformation of human civilization through systematic innovation was not inevitable, but rather the product of specific choices and commitments that might have been made differently or earlier under different circumstances. As we face our own challenges and opportunities in the 21st century, perhaps the most important lesson from this alternative history is that human potential remains largely untapped. The systematic approaches to innovation that transformed our imagined medieval world continue to offer possibilities for addressing contemporary challenges and creating futures that exceed our current expectations. Whether those possibilities are realized will depend, as always, on the vision, effort, and commitment of individuals who are willing to question established assumptions, pursue ambitious goals, and work systematically towards solutions that initially seem impossible. In that sense, the spirit of our imagined medieval innovator lives on in everyone who believes that human intelligence and effort can create a better world for future generations. And so, our journey through this alternative timeline comes to an end, leaving us with questions and possibilities that extend far beyond the specific historical circumstances we've explored. What if the systematic pursuit of innovation had begun centuries earlier than it actually did? What if global cooperation in technological development had emerged before nationalism and competition divided human societies? What if space exploration had begun when our ancestors were still learning to harness steam power? These remain tantalizing what-ifs, reminders that history is full of paths not taken and possibilities unexplored. But they also serve as inspiration for our own efforts to shape the future through systematic innovation, international cooperation, and the relentless pursuit of human potential. In that spirit, perhaps our imagined medieval innovator achieved his greatest success not in the specific technologies he developed, but in demonstrating that human beings need never accept their current limitations as permanent constraints on what they might eventually achieve.